So welcome everybody. So far we've got over 50 people watching, and the number keeps ticking up. So I want to welcome everyone to Lambtown Festival 2020, which is a virtual festival, the first one of its kind that I know of in the fiber arts world. And we have been having a really great time and record numbers of everything. People, we had over 1,000 people used our app yesterday, unique users, which was great. We had lots of folks tuning in for our vendor interviews and our meetups. It's been really lovely to see, and I'm so excited to be here to kick off day 2 with our workshop panel. We have Abby Franquemont, Judith McKenzie, and Maggie Casey here with us. They are all world-renowned teachers and authors, and they each recorded 2 workshops for Lambtown Festival this year. Last weekend, we did watch parties where people could watch the recorded videos and ask them questions during pause breaks. All of those are going to be available again if you missed it. We'll be re-releasing them next week, probably, after we have a chance to breathe after this rather busy weekend that we've got going on. So we're here today to chat with them about teaching in the fiber arts. There is a Q&A where you can ask questions, and if your question is for a particular person, please just indicate that in the Q&A so I know who to ask. Otherwise, I'll kind of open up questions, and whoever feels like answering them can answer them, and we can see where today takes us. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And I just want to say that it's been lovely working with all 3 of you and kind of getting to know you over the past couple of months. I know that it was not the easiest for anybody.
It's probably not the easiest for you, my dear. We must have driven you to the wall. Yeah, yeah.
I call her Saint Kira.
That's right. Yeah. Saint Kira to the rescue yet again. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I would like to do just a quick intro on each of you, but if anyone would rather introduce yourself, you're welcome to. So we've got Abby Franquemont is joining us from Peru, where she lives and works and teaches and hosts retreats when that kind of thing is possible. She's the author of Respect the Spindle, and she's quite reachable these days with a Patreon and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So despite having some internet difficulties in Peru at times, she is quite connected, which is lovely. And we were very happy to have Abby with us in person last year, and definitely glad to have her with us virtually this year as well. And we also have Judith McKenzie, who is the author of several books and many articles, many videos. She's a lifelong learner, and her passion and curiosity comes through in everything that she does. You can tell she loves learning and loves sharing. And I really, really loved watching her videos, especially because I felt like I was right there with her, which is nice. We also have Maggie Casey. And oh my gosh, Maggie, I just blanked on your book's title. It's on my shelf. Learn to Spin.
Start Spinning.
Start Spinning, thank you. The author of Start Spinning, which I used extensively when I was new to spinning about 15 years ago. She's also has many recorded videos for Long Thread Media and has some articles coming up in Ply Magazine. She had a couple classes for us on spinning braids and starting to spin, and did a wonderful job with the technicalities and getting nice detail shots. So if you know anyone who's new to those, she worked hard.
So kind, so kind.
She did. I learned things, and I have been a spinner for a while, and I teach beginning spinning. So it was nice to have a few little details that hadn't been learned before. So what I would like to do is get started with a few questions, and we have some things coming up in the Q&A as well, which is great. So please, anyone watching, feel free to add something in there. So I've got a couple questions from me to start out. You've all taught in various mediums, writing books, lecturing to large groups, hands-on workshops, and now virtual classes. I'm curious which of those you prefer. What's kind of your sweet spot with teaching? And whoever feels like answering first can go for it.
Oh, I will. I like humans close and within touching distance, you know. And I found that to be such a rewarding thing, to be able to watch people learn and watch them go from something they thought was really difficult to master it and watch their bodies change. It's really interesting. So I really like that contact with the student, to be in a room with them. I think the virtual stuff is great. I've done a lot of that in videos, but having a real human within my close proximity works really well. That way I can adjust them and I can adjust their wheel. And I'm grateful for those students because I learn just about as much as they do every time. Good.
Yeah, I think for a tactile thing, there's no real substitute for being there in person. But at the same time, there's stuff that is remarkable, you know, like getting to work with people all around the world at that point in time. But emotionally, it is more draining and less energizing when you can't be there in person. When you're there in person, you get, as a teacher, personally, emotionally, I get that boost from seeing somebody get it, or from being able to watch their process and the whole thing. And that's emotionally rewarding for me in a way that all of the other things fundamentally lack. So I leave the virtual teaching sessions going, I wonder if that was good enough, way more than I ever do when it's an in-person teaching session. And that's true for if it's static content like a book or a video that I release and put out there as well. It's never quite the same as seeing somebody get it.
Yeah, I think when you talk about teaching in person, I just really think I teach hands-on. I mean, I'm often taking the person's hands and just say, try it this way. So that was one of the things that was harder for me to do. But I agree with everybody else. I almost think it's like a cartoon, you know, when somebody finally gets it in a cartoon and the light bulb comes on over their head. I love those light bulb moments. And not being able to see you can read people so much easily when you can see them. You can see that they're just getting so frustrated that you either need to help or back off sometimes as well too. But hands-on is certainly my first vote. But you know, you have to learn a new skill in order to do it well, and I plan to work on it.
I think, Judith, that's what Judith and Maggie, both of you, like I've had classes with you both, as you know, where you've been the teachers and I've been the students. And what Maggie just said is one of the reasons why you're some of my favorite teachers and inspiration, because you keep pushing your own boundaries and looking to do more and learn more and keep that beginner's mind thing going.
Well, don't you think that's why we all teach? It's to learn more. I mean, I once asked a tapestry weaver if he got excited about teaching a class, and he said no. And I thought, oh, how sad for you. Just how sad. So
that actually brings me to one of the other questions I had here. I teach as well, and I think that a good teacher is always learning. So I'm wondering what all of you are curious about and what you're exploring now.
We're all thinking of the list. It's not that we don't have things. It's like, which one is going to come to?
Well, which one
do you want to explore?
Well, I took a class at Flyway a couple of years ago from Amy King on energized yarns. And I was one of my goals this year is to try to bring get rid of the chaos from my shambolic house. And so I was finishing up a sample. So I was just working on this, which is over twist Z and over twist S and in singles. And it was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to check more of this out too.
Oh no, Judith, you go.
No, you go ahead.
No, you.
Well, I live out here in the wilds, and one of the things I've been looking at is different fiber sources. You know, there's a lot of interesting fiber that we don't use, and especially bast fiber. So I collected the other day, I went out and collected fireweed, which is just ready to be pulled up by its roots and hung up to dry. So I'm going to try that and see if I can make something that will be sturdy enough to make a knotted bag. That's what I'd like, or weave with it. But we'll see. We'll see. Those rough yarns sometimes aren't as interesting to knitters or weavers, but we do need to, I think, I would like to get beyond just making clothing for women. I think it's, yeah, I've done that all my life. And now I'd like to look at things like, I have some beautiful old African pieces that are knotted grass in a raya formation in patterns, and then flat woven here and there in between, just like a random tapestry. And I think they're so beautiful. And I think I'd like to experiment with that. That's what I'd like to do. Yeah.
Judith, do you follow Sarah Sweat? She's been working with milkweed.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
With the stems, and spinning that. So her blog is amazing. She's been doing that for quite a while right now.
Yeah, that's great. I heard a lot of people were interested out here on the coast, farther in, because we don't have milkweed here, but farther in towards on the other side of the mountains, there's a lot of people who've been gathering milkweed because it does grow out there. Yeah, that's great. I did nettles when I was young, but that's a real tribal technique, and it's still in use. So stinging nettles are amazing. But again, they use them for fish nets, and they use them the way we use metal, and they last forever. I found fish nets when I was diving off the coast up farther north, towards the end of British Columbia. I found fish nets and traps, fish traps, that had been under the water for over 70 years, and they were still intact. They could still have been used. They were amazing. And they're all out of nettle, just have spun nettle, thigh spun nettle.
Wow.
So yeah. So it's an amazing, I mean, we look at all the modern things that we've done, the modern synthetics, and yet here we are with things that we could use in this new world that we haven't really explored. There's so many things in this new world that we haven't looked at. Food sources and fiber sources. So I'd like to do more of that. I think that would be fun.
Well, for my part, from a fiber perspective, I am trying to do a further fleshing out of the Andean techniques that aren't from the town where I grew up. So I am trying to learn some finishing techniques and finishing methods that are from some other towns, and some weave structures and patterns that are from some other towns. And on the non-fiber side of things, I am trying to learn how not to be in charge of everything, how to deal with the fact that that there's stuff I just can't control.
You mean like kind of waiting for that happy moment, that happy accident?
Right. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to really learn how to be open to the happy accident, to saying, okay, this is nothing like what I planned, but here's where this leads me.
Yeah.
And being open to that kind of thing. And that is tremendously challenging for me. I have a tendency to want to deal with everything, and especially deal with stress, by planning and having a game plan, having something ready to go, and sort of shifting my perspective on that to being able to say, I have no idea what's going to happen. I can't make a new plan. And that has been, since the pandemic, I found that like roughly every 2 weeks, I was reconfiguring everything in my 5-year plan, and it was impossible, right? So learning how to exist without a 5-year plan is really hard.
Good, that's good. That's really good. So can you tell us about your beautiful fiber that's hanging behind you in those glorious colors? It's just radiant.
Now the funny part there is those are some of the cheap synthetic yarns that people put more plying twist into to work with, or use in a lot of different ways. And I picked up that pile for starters because when quarantine first hit us, we were all really low on stash. We had way more knitters and weavers than we did stash, and so I issued a decree that we were supposed to all acquire yarn and fiber at every opportunity, or else. I had like 4 pounds of alpaca fiber and no yarn to speak of. I had weaving yarn for these textiles, but I didn't have enough to support 5 knitters with idle hands in a quarantine. So it was, all right, any yarn you run across, buy that yarn. Any knitting needles, anything. We gotta do it. So we were all super relieved because after about a month, the yarn that we had ran out, and that's just not a survivable thing. But so in Ollantaytambo in particular, in the remote weaving communities that are part of Ollantaytambo's district, there is now a 70-year tradition of using those synthetic fibers really extensively. And now people are also using mylar and a bunch of other things like that. And it's really interesting because it pushes my buttons on the one hand, and I want to say, well, let's preserve the traditional ways of doing things. But at the same time, people have been working with that for a long time and exploring those other materials, and it's really interesting what people are doing with them. So trying to push my boundaries on that too.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
I could show you the cool basket of, here we go. I could show you the basket of naturally dyed yarns.
Oh, look at how beautiful they are.
Yeah, aren't they?
I can't believe how beautiful that red is. Oh, break your heart.
I don't even have all the colors out here right now, but I like the green.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a glorious green. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Orange.
So I've got some good questions from people who are watching. So I think it's great just to let you chat too. So I'll kind of throw out a question, and whenever things taper down, we'll find a new one. Margaret is wondering what each of you found most challenging about remote teaching, and if there's anything surprisingly good about it.
I found everything challenging.
Thanks, Maggie. You're right.
But because I'm not a Luddite, but I kind of go in that area. But one of the things that I found challenging, and it's made me realize that from now on in my spinning classes, I'm going to put a glossary in, because in Computerese, there is no glossary that I know of, and I would love to know. But you look up, say, something as simple as URL, and even when they tell you what that means, it still doesn't make sense. Then you have to go to someplace else to understand that it means a website, and it stands for what? Universal
Resource Locator.
Right. Yeah. And it's like knitting. Once you know the code, you can do it. But if you're a new knitter, you don't know what a M1R is. But usually there's a glossary where you can look it up. So I think as textile people, maybe we need to, I'm going to start including glossaries because, again, in the past, I think it was more accepted. People understood textiles more than they certainly do now.
I think that's true.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a whole like 10-minute spiel that I do on jargon and a number of different classes that are prone to be jargon heavy, where I talk about having worked in tech and a lot of that kind of thing, and what the purposes are of jargon. And to try and make it really brief, the purposes of jargon are to rapidly allow people who are in the know, who know that terminology, to communicate quickly with each other about whatever it is without having to define those terms every single time. But another purpose is to identify who is in the know. So you go around a room full of tech people, and they all know what a URL is, and and what they mean when they say, you know, the mailer demon had a problem and things like that. And then people who aren't in tech have no idea. And so, so even as that serves to identify who is sort of in the in club, it also then can serve to keep people out of it. So in terms of the textile stuff, we have people sitting around at the guild meetings or in classes or whatever saying, well, I don't know what a woolen and a worsted means in this context.
Right.
And, you know, and so the question of what is jargon and what's just the knowledge that we build up over time within something is really a sticky one. So Maggie, I think that is a tremendous point.
Yeah. So, but that's one of the good things I learned and have now thought about it in how I work. I mean, you know, what is an orifice on a spinning wheel? You know, you use that. Oh, you've got to make sure it goes through the orifice.
Mm-hmm.
Your ear.
And how many times have people been sitting in our classes wanting to say, well, what do you mean orifice? And they didn't say it.
And you're embarrassed. Yeah.
They don't want to look like they're not on the right side. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Dear me.
Yeah. It's tough. For me, I think the single hardest thing about teaching online is that it's so hard to get a real sense of whether or not people got it. So maybe I had 20, 30 people in a class, and then we leave the class, and the 2 or 3 people who are sort of more extroverted and more prone to say things or ask questions, you know where they stand, but the other 17 to 27, you have no idea if they got it or not. And that it's always a little bit like that when you're teaching, right? Like you never know, leaving a 3-hour class at a festival, what people are really going to take home from it. And there's always that emotional, oh God, did I totally suck? Right. There's always that feeling. I know that you two feel this too, because I've run into you at the bar in the evening at those, and we've talked about this stuff, right? But that is for me probably the hardest part when it comes to all this, is that all of the skills that I've learned in self-evaluating how I did teaching a class and whether or not the methods that I used were effective are just out the door. So I won't actually know if the online teaching methodologies that I've been developing and working on and using are worth a crap or did their job until a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever, when people start sort of trickling back with that information. And that means there's this sense of putting things out there, and who knows, was it good? Was it a crapshoot? Who knows? And that's really hard because it makes it hard to proceed to the next class, taking into consideration the lessons learned from this one. And a lot of what makes a really successful teacher, in my opinion, is staying engaged with both the content and the student so that you continually change. I mean, like I've taught all spindles all day as a class. I don't even know how many hundreds of times, but it's never been the same class twice. And I'm curious, Maggie and Judith, if you feel the same about your most popular classes.
Yeah, about all my classes, because you are responding to the students you have. And of course, you're going to have questions that maybe you have never even considered. And so the class takes a slightly different direction. And I think that's really valuable. You know, I think teaching has made me a better teacher by far. I know that sounds so trite, but it's true. I learn when I'm in that class things that I wouldn't have thought about because I hadn't encountered that problem. But once I saw it, it was really interesting to think about how you could prevent that problem, how you could make it into something positive. And I like that. And I have really mixed feelings about, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world to have the photographer that I had to make the videos that I made with the old interweave. He was a wonderful, there were 2 of them, but there was one that was always there and he was wonderful. And to have a really good photographer makes a huge difference for how you can teach. I found that trying to do it myself, I was a bit dismal, more than dismal. I was ineffective because I couldn't see I couldn't see the student. I was just seeing the technical problems. And that's something that I'm going to overcome. I'm not quite sure how. Maybe, I don't know, surgery, implants, something will have to change, because I think it's the way that things are going. I think it is the shape of things to come. I think our recent experience has changed us slightly in how we are going to take in information. And I think it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting time. Yeah. That's what I think.
Well, in terms of feedback from students, I've got some emails I can forward you. It's also good to look at the chat if you want to pull that up, because there are already a lot of wonderful messages just today about people who enjoyed the workshops and the watch parties especially. So I'll send you some emails that I've gotten about how much people loved it. So I've got a question here, which is particularly for Abby, but welcoming comments from Maggie and Judith, because this might apply to you as well. Royce is wondering what differences you see between fiber artists in the United States versus elsewhere in the world that might affect your teaching style or even the content of your class. So I know, Abby, you're living somewhere where children learn to spin yarn quite young, and that is not the norm out here. I know it was for you, but so how does that affect if you're teaching over in the US?
Well, I had to make a lot of adaptations for that when I first started teaching, because there were a lot of things I didn't understand, first of all, about learning something practice-based as an adult, and second of all, about those cultural differences and stuff, right? So here, for instance, if somebody is making a mistake in their knitting, if somebody's sitting across the table from me making a mistake in her knitting, it would be rude if I noticed that and I didn't say, hey, you're twisting your stitches. You don't want to do that. But if I were in the US and somebody's sitting across the table from me and twisting her stitches, I would have to find a very diplomatic way to say that and think about if I should say it at all, right? So here it's mean to let somebody continue doing something that is potentially not what they want, or that potentially might cause them physical pain or what have you, right? Like in the States, generally speaking, we don't offer that kind of unsolicited advice. But here, somebody is likely to reach over, take the knitting out of your hands and say, I can't believe it causes me physical pain to watch you knit like that. Let me fix it. Here, do it like this, and hand it back. So these are really big and different things, right? So there's I would say that comes down to being a degree of informality and common knowledge that everyone kind of has, right? So even people who don't think of themselves as being fiber artists here probably do some kind of fiber arts in the part of Peru that I'm in, and so that sort of feedback process is commonplace. It's in everybody's life, and that is not the same in a part of the world where people mostly pick it up as adults and are much more focused and serious about it, right? So the stakes seem higher. So that is, if I had to pick the single biggest thing, it would be that I think to a lot of the adult learners that I work with in North America, the stakes seem really, really high, right? Like this is a big deal. This is going to be the perfect skein of yarn, and if it's not, all is lost, right? And here, people are like, it's a sweater. If this one doesn't work out, I'll make another one.
Yeah, that's I think you're absolutely right.
All right, so I have a question here that I think this is probably a bit of a follow-up to Maggie's class on learning to spin, but I'm sure the other two of you might have a suggestion as well. It's actually two different people asked a similar question. They are wondering what to do if you are learning to spin on a wheel and you've got fast feet and slow hands, or if you're trying to line that up and counting doesn't work for you. Any tips on getting that consistency down?
Practice and patience. I mean, I think we all move at different speeds, and you have to give yourself permission to not be able to do it perfectly. I think a lot of it, at least here in the US, we expect that first skein to be beautiful. And when it's not, it's heartbreaking. Teaching a lot of beginner classes, I had one woman in the class who said, well, I paid for the class, so I was going to hang in there. It's a 6-week class. And by the 3rd week, she finally got it. But yeah, and I was thinking about me with the Zoom. I learned by mistake, and I have to make that same mistake several times. So you just have to realize your own learning, style, and be nice to yourself.
You know,
And get a larger world.
That's probably true.
I would say you can pause. You can always, doesn't matter what equipment you're on, you can always park and draft. You can always stop using your feet. You can always stop putting twist in with the spindle. You can always pause and then just move the twist around without having to generate more. And if you're a real micromanager and you really aren't going to be able to find a way to give yourself the grace to have your yarn not be perfect right at the outset, then that is a good way to be able to micromanage to your heart's content.
So the other thing that I know is that muscle, if you took Abby's arm and Maggie's arm and my arm, my spinning arm, we all have muscles that the average human does not have. And that's what an acquired skill is. You have to put the muscle on. You don't get to put the muscle on unless you work. You don't get to work unless you make mistakes. And they aren't really mistakes. It's your body building up the knowledge to move your muscles and to have the muscles to move it. My hand's a different shape than other people's. And my the muscle that goes up the side of my arm is decidedly different. And those things you can't do that. It's not like you, just because you can understand it intellectually, that you will magically become either a spinner or a knitter or a weaver. You actually have to put the muscles on and coordinate them so that they can do that job. So be patient. I always tell my students, if you were only as patient with yourself as you are with everybody else, this would go easier.
Perfect.
When I had to have hand surgery and then physical therapy extensively to recover from that and do all of that, Judith, you're absolutely right. I couldn't spin for a long time, and it was because I had so much muscle and nerve and tendon atrophy that I mean, physically it wasn't there. It just was not there.
All right, so I have a question from Chris. Wondering, especially for those of you who learned fiber arts as an adult, and I imagine all of you learned some fiber arts as adults, wondering if you can pinpoint the thing that led you to a life in fiber, kind of the root of that, if it was an early childhood experience or particular mentors or a genetic memory. Cultural exploration, I think I'll add that in there too.
Well, I'm the product of a couple of anthropologists with an interest in fiber getting together to conduct an experiment in nature versus nurture. So both of my parents were fiber people and anthropologists and stuff. So I never had a fighting chance. I tried really hard, as Judith and Maggie will both attest, I think, to escape having anything to do with fiber and walk away from it. And it turns out that's harder than you think.
Lucky us, that you found that out. Yeah.
Well, I had none of those things. It's something I ask in all my beginning spinning classes. Why are you here? Because when you told your friends you were going to take a spinning class, it wasn't what you are doing right now. They're all thinking you're on bikes. But I don't know why. I didn't love Sleeping Beauty. I grew up in a house where handcrafts didn't exist. There was some bad sewing, but nothing to entice you. And I just took a spindle class on a whim. And look where it led. So my feeling is, you need to take chances, because who knows what it may do to your life. I mean, I'm so glad I took that horrible class.
It was a horrible class.
Oh gosh, it was a boat anchor and it was comb top, and it was before park and draft was considered normal. It didn't exist. And it was back when you took the spindle and you took the yarn around the bottom of the spindle and then brought it up so it looked like a sail on a
Flying
sailboat.
buttress.
So why I continued, I have no idea.
I'm glad you did.
Me too.
Yeah.
And Judith,
Yes.
you learned early.
I did. I learned really early. And my parents, I learned from a neighbor lady. And I had lots of stories from my grandmother about the old days in Scotland. And somehow my parents weren't interested in the old days in Scotland. They were here now and we were going to have a new life. And this is the modern world. And look, we got a car. And I just wanted to dye things in the backyard with a tin can, which I did, and little campfires. And I can't be the only one of us who twisted the lint in the pocket of my coat into little strings. I know that others of us have done that. And I fell happily into the hands of a neighbor lady who had moved out from Norway and wove her own dresses and wore them. She wove all the clothes in her house. She wove her husband's clothes. She wove her kids' clothes, who were quite a bit older than I was. And I was smitten. I followed her around like a puppy. And finally she said, "Would you like to learn to spin?" And I said, "Yes, please." And that's how I learned. So, but it was horrifying to my parents. They were horrifying. They said, "We did that in the old days. This is a modern world, and you should reconsider what you're doing." However, I have had a wonderful life, a wonderful life. I can't even imagine what else I could have done that would have made me feel as happy and as contented and as rich as ever a person could be. So lucky us, because I know you feel the same way. We do. Yeah, lucky. Lucky. And I met millions of wonderful people. I mean, just that's the other thing, is that it is an extraordinarily diverse and interesting community that we live in. Well, I have a person that I taught spinning to a while ago, who I like a lot, and I think she's very interesting, and she had a lot of little problems learning how to spin. And then one day I asked her what she was, and she was an astrophysicist in charge of one of the big explorations of beyond space. And I thought, and I was worried about her inability to spin easily. And, she was so brilliant and but was fascinated with spinning. So I think it's an interesting thing. What draws people into wanting to learn how to make a thread? What is it that it is? I still don't know what it is for everybody. And I never asked her yet, but I will one of these days. Yeah.
So we have a question. Oh, go ahead.
My iPad just popped up a remember this, and
Oh, a memory from last year.
yeah. So it's last year at Lambtown.
Oh. I don't know if any of the three of you have looked into it, but we have an app this year, which is kind of cool. And the part of it that I've been appreciating is there's a photo area where people can upload images. And a lot of them are images from Lambtown past. And I definitely saw a few pictures with you, Abby, of people who are, either, at the festival with friends, or why are you at Lambtown? And it's just like them and Abby. So
gosh.
it's really nice seeing all those memories of Lambtown Festivals past in the photo game.
I just thought it was funny that it just popped that up. Is it remember this? My iOS memories, right?
So Grace is wondering if any of you have a dream project that you haven't gotten started yet, like the big thing that you want to conquer.
Oh,
Jeans, hand spun jeans. I spun a lot of the cotton for it, but it's in storage in the US, and so hopefully I'll pick up some of those singles and continue along with it. But yeah, I would like to make a hand spun, hand woven blue jeans.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Any other epic projects for the other two of you?
I always have them. I don't know which epic project I'd like to do the most, that's the problem. Yeah. I grew up amongst Coast Salish people, and I've loved their dancing blankets a lot. And I'd love to make something that was modern, but out of the same techniques and the same materials. And I've been spinning a lot of wild fibers like wolf and mountain goat and those kind of things, see how that would work. But it's curious. Yeah, I'd like to do that. I love the old cloth. There's so many amazing techniques, and there's a crossover with some Peruvian stuff that I was looking at recently. I have a good collection of pre-Inca cloth, and one of the things they have there is a cloth that I swear that the direction, again, is about 27 different ways, just like a Chilkat dancing blanket. It's the only cloth I've ever seen that had that same curious ability to make flat cloth with the warp. The warp is loose at the end, so they move it all the way around, and then they add weft threads as well. So very curiously beautiful, and from a technical point of view, absolutely fascinating. So I'd like to try, see if I could even make, postage stamp that was using that technique. It would be good. Yeah.
Did you get a chance? Oops, sorry.
I'm a bear of very little brain, so my attention span, I don't know, is long enough for epic. I mean, I would like to do a lot of different things. My list of what I want to do is long, but I don't know whether any of them would be considered epic. Sorry, Abby.
Maybe it's an epic list. Judith, I was going to ask if you got a chance to see any of the anillado, which is the stuff from the Paracas technique, like the Gothenburg mantle that CTTC reproduced over the past 5 years or so.
No, I haven't. That would be interesting.
I'll
make
grab
a note.
some.
Will you? Oh, good.
I'll grab some.
Okay, good.
All right, well, she's doing that. I've got a question that, Judith, you had mentioned your garden earlier, and Maggie, you might have this as well. Kenneth is wondering what you planted, and specifically if you have any dye plants there or fiber-bearing plants.
Oh, I grow a bit of indigo. I have a friend who is growing indigo commercially, and so I have a few indigo plants in my garden. And I gather a lot of plants to dye with. I'm particularly lichens. So, and I also have, which Abby will think hysterically funny, I have a box with cochineal bugs that I'm growing on my desk. And every so often they escape and they march off. And all of a sudden I'll be typing away on something and my fingers will turn pink. And it is the wretched cochineal bugs marching off again. But I've had them for, 6-7 years now. And I just get a prickly pear cactus and throw it in their big box, and they look happy. They're multiplying and doing well. But this year in my garden, I was so excited about, well, we have had maybe 9 days of sunshine. The rest has been low cloud, low fog, and a smoke. And so nothing very much has grown at all. Not at all. Things just withered. We got one day of high heat and everything that had been growing in the cool weather just literally burnt up. My peas and my lettuce and those kind of things. So for all that idea that I could work in my garden and I'd be really satisfied, I had to go back and clean my studio instead, which was probably just as rewarding. But yes, a wretched garden. But indigo grows really, really well here. I was really surprised. I thought it needed a hotter climate, but we've done really well with it. And while I'm saying that, we didn't harvest everything all at once, and we had a frost. And I thought, oh, la-di-da, that's it. No indigo for me this year. And in fact, the plants were so beautiful, frozen with a beautiful burgundy stalks and these bright blue leaves, that I brought them in and then dried the leaves and thought, well, why don't I try it? Why don't I try it? And I got amazing color off the frozen leaves. So maybe climate isn't as important as we think in the intensity that we get out of that. But yeah, but yes, the woman's name who's really good in indigo in this area is Elizabeth Merrill, and she grows amazing variety of indigos, and that's who I learned it from. Yeah.
So Abby, I think you missed this question, but we're asking if anyone is growing any dye stuff or spinnable fiber in their gardens this summer.
Oh, yes, I have some right over there. I have Koye, which is which makes when mixed with other stuff, this color, and also this color.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it is a flowering shrub, and I can't quite carry the laptop over to in range of it. But that's the main one, and I'm growing that because it grows particularly nicely in the Sacred Valley of the Incas, and because I think it's an underappreciated yellow. I'm trying to appreciate colors I haven't appreciated necessarily in the past, or that I think other people don't appreciate as much as they should.
I had no garden this year. We celebrated in Colorado by having the hottest summer ever, and we're in a drought. And trying to garden at 99 degrees just doesn't work for me. So, but I have grown cotton in the past, just not this year. And I had to bring it inside in October, and the bowls finally were pickable, I think, in February. And cotton plants do not make pretty Christmas trees.
Oh, man.
Right. So Abby, I've gotten a couple questions about your set dressing. You talked a little earlier about the synthetic yarns hanging behind you, but I've got a question both about that beautiful bowl of naturally dyed yarns and what they were dyed with, and also the textiles hanging behind you.
Oh, like these?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my set dressing, we decided to, and I should show you what I have for tablecloths even. Since I've been doing more and more online teaching, we wanted to try to find ways. That's me and Marta and Manuel, who are my key staff and best friends here. Wanted to find ways to make everything look as interesting and scenic as possible, but to have textile related stuff. So about the dyes, well, there are a whole lot of different things. I would recommend giving a quick watch of the program that I did on textile traditions when that becomes available, because there is a whole segment that is a dye day in Chumbivilcas, in the province of Chumbivilcas. And that has a bunch of information on it. So most of the dye stuffs here are locally grown and locally available. Sometimes people will buy indigo that's imported now and work with it, but that's about it for for that. Usually it's stuff that is from in Peru. So they are mostly plant-based dyes, except for cochineal, which is an animal-based dye, because it is a beetle that lives on the prickly pear cactuses that we all have here, and we eat the fruit of, and that kind of thing too. So there's that. Most of the textiles in the Andes are use textiles, as well as being beautiful. There's not the cultural perception here that there is a big separation between form and function, and so everything is beautiful, even as it is. Everything is beautiful, even as it is useful and functional. So I'll kind of turn my computer this way a little bit. You can see a few of the things that I have out, but hand spun, hand woven ponchos and lichlias, which is the Quechua word for the mantas that women wear, and a lot of that kind of thing. And then I've ended up, I really like bags, and then bags are a nice small thing that people can give as gifts. So this was a present from my friend Maruja. It's the traditional pattern of Chinchero, the town where I grew up. And then this is knitting. This is the chuliu technique for the hats. And my friend Adela made this bag, which has a zipper in it, and it's with all the chuliu techniques and traditional Chinchero things. So people like to give me cool textile presents. I love living in a world where people give each other textile presents all the time, right? Like, and it's also really nice because in the States, nobody ever wanted to give me like a yarn or textile present, and here everybody does because they know I'll use it. But I'll show you probably my favorite, which is my birthday present from this past year.
My God.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Which is a
Isn't that
spindle
beautiful?
spun, naturally dyed, backstrap woven jacket with
Gorgeous.
traditional Chinchilla patterns.
That's
And
beautiful.
hidden pockets for me to have a cell phone and a wallet in. And it is a Western world friendly garment that has all the traditional Chinchero textile elements. And that was, like I say, that was a birthday present. And my thanks for helping document the world's largest manta project, which also you can see featured in the presentation on textiles of Peru that I did. So the spindles and the balls of yarn and all that stuff, it's basically my stash. And we figured out a way to kind of dress up my outdoor office, which usually is just me and my laptop at this picnic table. Under the Caunia trees and with the electricity that Manuel conveniently installed for me. So usually that's my outdoor office. The lifestyle here is your bedroom, your house. It's for sleeping in, maybe for food prep, but you mostly are outside, including in covered outside areas for your general activities. So me having an outside office isn't that unusual. But yeah, we wanted to find good ways to make my outside office look like it was a real and serious textile place, so that it would be appealing for doing videos from.
So Abby, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So I have a question about indigo in Peru. So I am looking at my pre-Columbian Peruvian pieces, and by golly, could I just point out that there's a good deal of blue in them, and that's before there's contact with Europe. And so what I always hear is that the Spaniards brought indigo, and you can date your textiles by that. Well, I think that's just nonsense. So I was up with Nilda one time. She had this big pot, and she said, I can't remember what she called it, but she had sword ferns. They look like the West Coast sword ferns. And, give me, I have to have a little slack, because no, I did not try it when I got home with the sword ferns. But she had this big bag of sword ferns into those big old pots, and we boiled it. And then she threw some other small thing in there. And we pulled the yarn out, and it went from the typical yellowy color to blue.
And it oxidized, and yep.
It did. And it was exactly like indigo. And she said, oh, it was a bad year for it this year. It wasn't quite as bright as it would normally be because the sword fern crop was a little slow. Now, for heaven's sake, what happened there? And why haven't other archaeologists, and I've read everything I could, and nowhere does it talk about the fact that they haven't actually seen the conflict between saying that it's a European technique to have the indigo introduced and the old textiles that still, I know, have it.
That plainly are pre-Columbian textiles and have that blue, right? And have
Yes,
that blue.
plainly.
And
Got it in
plainly
my
have
little
that.
hand.
Exactly. And and where that blue occurs on cotton and on animal fibers. And
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
know it's the same dye. That particular plant is a jungle plant. It is not widely bought and sold. Like if we want it up here in the highlands, we have to get somebody who we know who's going down to the jungle to get the specific thing, because it isn't harvested and sold for that market. And then this comes back, in my opinion, to the same thing that was the impetus for my parents doing their self-funded research in the 1970s when they couldn't get funding, because the methods that they wanted to use were go ask people who are still doing this how they do it. And the responses that they kind of got in the early 1970s was, well, but where have those people published, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't see a doctorate on fire. And so how can they be authoritative on this, right? And my parents were like, well, you know, turns out they've got thousands of years of history that they're preserving, and, you know, maybe they get to be authoritative on those things. And so my parents were really radical when it comes to all of that kind of thing. But that particular plant is grown down in the jungle. So the regions where my parents worked and brought that degree of radicalism here in the highland part of Cusco are very separate from the one down in the jungle where that kind of stuff is going on. So there's still a need for somebody to go be the radical who brings who helps bring the awareness of the fact that people have a robust and long-standing textile tradition that has not been recognized by the English-speaking or Western ivory tower. And then people like you, me, or Maggie went into some trouble with that as well, because there's a limited extent to which those of us who are hands-on practitioners and out teaching in the sort of mass market audiences are seen as legitimate by academic audiences as well, for lack of a better way to put it. You know, but where have we published? Well, you know, the leisure press, right? So there's there's some of that, and you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you that something that is clearly the indigo process and from indigo-based plants existed here, and the textile record shows it. When we look at pre-Columbian textiles, we absolutely see those vibrant blues, particularly in the coastal desert stuff.
Yeah.
And that was like, I was going to talk about the Paracas textile that went to Sweden, the Gothenburg textile, just a little bit about that. I'll put a link in about that, and the reproductions of that, which are very tricky and complicated. And so that's a right. And assembling whole textiles from that. So Judith, I will send you personally a link to a video that I did about an exhibit last year in Cusco. Actually, maybe if Kira wants it, I'll send it to Kira and let her pass it on to anybody who's interested after the fact.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I wasn't just delusional.
No.
So I've got a question from Lee, but there's a bit of a love letter to all of you on the way to the question. So I'm going to read it because it sounds like everyone wants feedback from students, and this is a really good one. So Lee took a couple of workshops and loved them both, and was especially grateful for the interaction enabled by having the live Q&A. And saying here, the wonderful thing about the workshops is how many people could participate. Because usually the limit on number of students for live workshops closes out generally pretty quickly, I know, for the three of you. And so a lot of people aren't able to come. It's especially gratifying during these times when we feel isolated So thank you for the extra effort, and know that your students are appreciating every bit of it, even knowing that it would be a richer experience in person, hands-on. And then the question here is, as instructors, what worked best and what might you do differently next time or recommend to other festivals looking into the future and into 2021 if this continues to be part of our fiber events going forward?
All right, I got one. On that. And one of the things that I think you did that was really exceptional was advanced training for the teachers, where you brought in another instructor who has been doing a lot of Zoom workshops and lectures to present for us. And I feel like that went a long way towards helping us figure out what we were even shooting for, right? What are we even trying to accomplish here? And that also, I hope, made you feel like there was a cohesive quality, a general coherency and consistency from class to class that you could sort of count on. I think that, those of us who have been teaching for festivals for a while, we sort of know what the drill is, what the routine is, what people are going to expect. But in this case, nobody has any idea what to expect. So that was absolutely terrific, Kira. And I think you should absolutely make a point of doing that moving forward. That's something that made it it made me feel a lot more confident going into this, that I was going to be able to produce something that was actually going to work.
I thought the watch party was amazing because, again, just talking to somebody, talking to a device, I had no idea what was happening. But with the watch party, with having people ask questions, again, was like, okay, maybe there was a chance after all. So I think that should continue with anything. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I need to do is learn how to use a second camera, obviously. But
and I could really use to learn how to use the first camera.
Well, that as well. Yes.
Time. I had a terrible time, and I didn't expect it. And I've thought about it a lot and thought about how I could do it differently. But you're right, a second camera would have made a big difference. But part of it is just that, I don't know. I think I like the idea of it. I like the idea of being able to be in touch with people and to help with things that they may need some help with. That would be great. And you can do it once you can't do that in an email. I cannot do it in an email very well. But if I could see them, then I would have a much better chance of teaching than I do by just trying to make contact over a computer without the image. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that I'll get better at this. That's what I'm hopeful about. Ever hopeful. Yeah.
It is super a learning process. So it doesn't matter how good a teacher you are, if your entire environment, if your entire paradigm for how you're supposed to present the content changes dramatically, you got to go back to the drawing board. So one of the things that I think is absolutely the case for people teaching on the stages that Judith and Maggie and I are teaching on is that we've done it a lot, right? So we've had that trial and error. We've had those moments where somebody burst into tears and ran screaming from the classroom, and I'm laughing, but it's really not funny, except it is in hindsight, because everything's funny in hindsight, right? But we've had those moments and we've had those failures, and we've learned from them, and we've built over decades the expertise that we have in presenting those classes in that context. And so now we're looking at doing for the first time, or maybe the second time, classes in this electronic context. And we may be the best teachers in the world of what we're talking about, but we're teaching in a whole new stage, in a whole new way. So another major factor is that so many of the students were such good sports, right? So when something didn't go, when something didn't go exactly how we expected. Students could have cried and run screaming from the classroom, which is a way that we've learned lots in the past. But instead of doing that, instead of derailing everything, instead of running away and everything, they mostly, muchas gracias. They mostly sat tight. And this is Marta. Everyone say cheers to Marta for being just a terrific entire right arm making so much of this happen. Gracias, Marta. But yeah, you know, that's just the extent to which people have been a good sport about this has really made it work. Really made it work.
Indeed.
I agree.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, every watch party had a little hiccup or three, and people just amused each other in the chat, and it was great. Yeah, so something that I would like to just mention, Maggie and Judith, because I know Abby is already doing this, what I think the two of you would really enjoy in the realm of virtual teaching is a smaller group in a meeting where you can see everybody's faces, and they will be blurry and you will not be able to see what they hold up to the screen very well, but you'll get that feedback. And I think you would enjoy it the most with somebody else there to do the administrative side of things and handle all the Zoom details. So you know how to reach me if you want to talk about that more or set something up, because that's it is much easier to have somebody there to help out with that kind of thing. It's a limited class, but that's nice because then you get to see everybody.
Right. Thank you. I also have planned that I am just going to video myself a couple of times a week, just because, as I said,
Maggie, we've lost your sound.
Yeah.
Or at least I have.
Yeah,
No,
I
me
did
too.
Yeah. I'm going to
so
give you
bad.
Can you start that over, Maggie? You were just
Yeah.
about to say you're going to do some videos.
Okay. Oh, I'm just going to practice doing videos. I'll
Mhm.
leave it at that. Yeah.
You know what I would suggest, just because everyone would love this, is Abby does Instagram Live a lot. And I know you're on Instagram, Maggie, and you just hit the live button and you talk to your iPad and show a technique or whatever, and people can respond in the moment. And that might be
Okay.
fun for you to get the practice being on screen, but actually have folks reacting in real time too.
Have feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
and actually, it occurs to me, I don't know why this didn't occur to me before, but if either of you is interested, and you too, Kira, if you'd like to join me for some of the live streams that I do, and we just have a chit chat at some point in time, that's something we could definitely do. I think that would be big fun.
Okay.
Sounds
Sounds
practice.
great. One of the things I did like about me being the only person in the room, I could do as many retakes as necessary. And there were a lot of them. You know, if there'd been somebody filming it, when I got to retake 9,632,000, they wouldn't have been there anymore.
That's right.
All right, so let's see. So we've got questions in the Q&A. We don't have a lot of them, so if anybody has something to ask, please feel free to add it in there. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, but it's a little bit harder. But what we do have in the chat is just a lot of messages of encouragement and people who have really appreciated the workshops that you did, the Q&A sessions, this right now. We've got Maureen mentioned that all educators of any subject are having to learn new methods. It's a big challenge, and everyone appreciates that you're making these efforts to learn how to do it so that we can stay connected and keep learning.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And then let's see. So in the Q&A, I've got kind of a specific question from Betty. She's saying that she has a lot of alpaca fiber and wants to spin for a sweater, and is based on a class with Abby last year. She's understanding that she can actually make 100% alpaca sweater, but wants some ideas on how to spin it to make a yarn that's going to work well in that.
You absolutely can make a sweater from entirely alpaca. The one caution that I would make is that it's going to be very warm, and when I say very warm, I mean so warm that there may be a lot of times of the year that you won't wear it in the United States. So that is going to be the big caution that I would make, and that is really a big reason for blended alpaca. I would sample two things. One, a 2-ply yarn for something that is knit more loosely in a lacy kind of way. And the other thing would be a cabled yarn where the singles are relatively low twist, and then you get more of your structure from doing a first plying pass that is very high twist, which then relaxes into the cabled structure. And both of those things will deal with the common complaint that people have about alpaca, being that it stretches out in knitting yarn. And one of the reasons that happens in a lot of mill spun knitting yarn, in my opinion and experience, is because they really haven't put enough twist in to make a structurally sound yarn. And the reason they're doing that is because if you put a lot of twist into the singles, it will have a harsher hand. And that is seen as being as desirable or as readily marketable for the knitting audience, again, in my opinion. But the thing to remember is that you can get a lot of the structure in your yarn and a lot of the stability from it, not necessarily only from the spinning portion for the singles, but from the plying pass aspect of things, manipulating other yarn structures. And Judith and Maggie, I would love your opinions on that as well.
I think, Abby, what you said about people underspinning for knitting is really important. One of the things I think people should watch is they should watch the twist discharge out of their yarn while they move it around the hook. Because in knitting, the actual physical motion of making that loop takes twist out of it. So if you are judging the feel of your garment by the feel of the yarn before you've knit it, you might make a little mistake and think that it was too harsh. But a tighter twist will make a smoother surface, and longevity. Well, it's not just longevity, but it's also fit. If you don't put enough structure in most yarns, including alpaca, and alpaca particularly because it doesn't have quite the same crimp and interlocking crimp structure that some wools have, treat it more like a beautiful silk. What will happen is that it will stretch and bag and you'll be unhappy with it. But it won't be scratchy if you put more twist in it. And I think that's the confusion. Sometimes with wool, it does feel a little more scratchy if you put a lot of twist in it. But that's not going to happen with alpaca. Yeah.
And your sample will prove it.
Yeah. Sample, for heaven's sakes. Yeah. But as soon as you put it on and hang it off your shoulders, it's that weight of the garment that'll stretch it out if you don't have a good structure in the yarn. So yeah, put more twist in it. You can't go wrong.
So Abby, you're thinking of a finer yarn as well to counteract that drapiness or stretchiness question?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the yarns that I see people complaining about that are mill spun yarns have a relatively thick singles. It's relatively low twist. It's maybe not even spun to the point of being structurally sound as singles. And then it's also plied loosely. And that's so that it has in the skein the appearance of being lofty and soft and fluffy. And so that's yarn that is, like Judith is saying, designed to have the skein be a finished product and have skein appeal and all that kind of thing. But it's not spun with the end intent of being a garment. And this is a problem that I think we see with a lot of mill spun yarns, not just from alpaca, but a lot of mill spun yarns where the end product that they're looking to sell is that skein of yarn. They don't care if it's good for the end use.
Yeah, I agree too. I can tell you now on my not an epic list, but things I'm going to try is some cabled alpaca. I haven't done that, but I agree so much that it does need extra stability to hold its shape. So, and as an ex-owner of a spinning and weaving and knitting shop, everybody, probably 75% of the people who came in to buy knitting yarn wanted merino. Where's your merino yarn? Or where's your alpaca yarn? And it's like, but we have all this other really good yarn that's going to hold up better and last longer. But it wasn't as soft. And so soft in some ways is a 4-letter word.
In several ways.
Yeah. And it's a hard, how many years have we been saying this, all three of us? you know,
Right.
or a twist, for heaven's sakes, twist, put the twist in. And if only people would watch what happens when they move that around their knitting needle. And, you know, I'm a weaver. Watch what happens when you put your warp on and the yarn rotates. That's what it does. It rotates and it discharges twist as it winds on that beam. If you don't have enough twist, you'll end up with fabric that's like tissue paper or toilet paper even. The minute it gets any pressure on it, it won't last. That's not what you're aiming for.
I want to say, I feel like that's something that we see come on the scene after industrial textile manufacture, right? After we're looking at the mill producing our yarns and fabrics and phasing out skilled artisans from the process of making our textiles. And I don't think that's an accident. I think the fact that textiles wear out sooner is desirable for the industrialized world because you know, who wants a textile that's going to last 30 years if you're selling textiles that you want people to keep buying? So I even say that from a political perspective, one of the most radical things that a person can do is make a sweater that you're going to wear for 30 or 40 years, right? Like how many fewer sweaters is that end up in a landfill? How many fewer exploitative manufactured garments is that, right? And how much better for the earth and more sustainable is that? So, I mean, it doesn't sound it doesn't sound on the face of it like knitting a sweater is a super radical act, but it is, right? And the other thing is you're going to get exactly what you want. And if we look at the archaeological record and historical record, and we look at textiles that are more than 300 years old, that are pre-industrial textiles, then we really do see that almost across the board, everywhere in the world have a lot more twist than what we think goes into yarns now today. Everything from a store-bought t-shirt to bed sheets to tablecloths, it all has less twist and less structure than it did 50 years ago, let alone 300 years ago. And I think that is in part because of the move towards more disposable textile goods and then everything else.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I don't know how we can move away from that. I just don't know how. And, you know, I think the difference in yarns that are used in some high-end clothing and the yarns that are sold to knitters are phenomenally different. You know, they're not using the same yarn to make those wonderful sweaters that are going to last. And I think what we've done is we've looked at that, we've made a market. That's what's happened. I know that your hand spun and my hand spun and Maggie's hand spun is going to last longer than any of us will.
Oh yeah,
that's what it'll do. And yes, I do think that that's not a good thing for market economy practices. But that's why we're here. That's exactly why we're here, isn't it? You know,
it is
to make lasting, beautiful objects that will talk about what life was like here. You know, I look at those old textiles that I have, and I look at something that is 1000 BC, and it's still beautiful, still absolutely beautiful, and yeah, I wonder what we will leave behind.
Yeah, I wonder what's actually going to survive to become part of the archaeological record, right? What will be the archaeological textiles of 1,000 years from now, right? What will they be looking at and saying, you know, I mean, are they going to be looking at, you know, the hot right now on Ravelry sweater and saying, well, there was a major movement to make these. And I wonder if this was, you know, political in nature or what happened. I like to think about what the things are that people are going to sort of extrapolate from that. But I think there's going to be a staggering amount of the material culture of the contemporary era that isn't there for future archaeologists to try and figure out who we were and what we were all about. So I like to think that we, as hand spinners and weavers and knitters and all that kind of thing, are taking a stand for what the future is going to know about who we were.
Yeah.
So spinning and knitting is a radical act, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
A radical act, and one that has longevity, one that will outlive us. Our textiles will outlive us, like Judith just said, and that means we get to say what people in the future are going to know about us to a great extent, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully more than the plastic.
Hopefully.
Hey, I'm pretty sure silk and alpaca can outlast plastic. I'm sure they can. It may take a bit.
Well, we have bast fiber yarns that we know are spun yarns the newest discovery is 50,000 years old, and that's before Homo sapiens as we exist now. So those are Neanderthals making yarns that we can handle and see now. So I mean, it's pretty interesting, and so this whole period of a few hundred years of industrially produced textiles is a blip so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a blip
For sure. Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah.
Well, whether it goes away and what happens in the long run is another question, but I think there's a lot there, and I think and this will come back to something else Judith and Maggie, we've talked about before, over beers at that bar at the fiber event or whatever, a time or two, and that is that that I think some of us believe that making things with our hands is part of our human birthright and is part of is so much of why we do this, right? Like, well, I don't know, why am I a textile professional? Because I like doing stuff with my hands. And in the Quechua culture here in Peru and in the Inca culture, your intellect is considered to reside in your hands. And so it's obvious from that perspective within that culture why somebody would continue to do things with their hands. But I think that's part of what so many of us in this audience as well have been deprived of over time, right? That's what makes us want to do things like go to Lambtown, take classes and learn how to spin and make sweaters, or go be potters, or go be mechanics, or go be all these different things, is that we have this fundamental human desire to make stuff with our hands and do things with our hands. And it's part of what makes us exist, right? So in the long run, do I believe that very possibly we're going to see more of a return to that kind of thing? Well, so far since the Industrial Revolution, there's been a cyclical thing where you've got like the arts and crafts movement, and you've got the hippie back to the land movement, and you've got like an off-grid movement, and you've got that kind of thing moving along. But I think that there is a real possibility that long term, this industrial disposability does not end up being sustainable and does not end up being totally the wave of the future. I'm curious, Maggie and Judith, what you think about that.
I hope.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always remember that the word articulate, that means how you move your hands. That's what that word means. And that there's definitely, so I'm a person who I had a stroke when I was young during a pregnancy. And so I was 20 and I had lost, I'd lost a lot of vocabulary and a lot of body movement on one side. I'd been a spinner and I wanted to spin again. And these guys made me an electric spinning wheel, which I got in the hospital bed and managed to get the bed sheets wrapped around it and just total chaos. But by golly, I know that spinning repaired my brain. Mm-hmm. So did the people who watched me get better. And I know that it improved my vocabulary and my ability to speak. I do not drag one leg, well, not much, and I don't drool, not much. But I swear that it was that spinning, because what it does is it involves your hands in a curious way. You move one hand, in one hand is sensing the fiber. And depending on whether you're left-handed or right-handed, you'll choose which hand to do that with. But there's a motion in between it that stimulates parts of your brain to become articulate again. And I think that's a valuable thing. The number of things that we do as machines take away our jobs, they also relieve us of work. And I'm not always sure that that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. You can't just live in your head. Your body and your head your body and your brain, your body and your mind are intimately related. And I just think it's healthy. I think spinning's really healthy. I think it gives you, do you remember that old nursery rhyme that we've used now and then in class? The one that says cross patch, draw the mat, sit by the fire and spin.
Right.
Look up and drink it up and ask the neighbors in. Well, I think that's quite true. You know, that spinning has a restorative effect on humans. And heaven knows I've used it a lot in the last few months. It's been very good to have that. Yeah. Yeah. So those kinds of things, when we do without them in our workforce, we narrow our humanness in some curious way. And I think we have to make sure that we keep things that we do with our hands, both hands, going. Yeah, we just have to.
Right.
Yeah, and I think using a keyboard isn't the only way to do it. Yeah.
No, I think you have to create something physical as well. I mean, whether it's a good meal or you're digging in the garden. I mean, there's something about actually creating the balances.
Yeah.
That these are desires of the human animal, you know. I believe to an extent that working to do textile pursuits and that kind of and artisanal things in general is likely part of what caused brain development and brain changes in early hominids to create the animals that we are today, with more brain capacity and a lot of that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, and there are paleoarchaeologists and anthropologists who believe similarly that tool use is what that is what brings that about. And tool use kind of translates into making stuff.
It does indeed. And besides that, we wouldn't have got here. I mean, people, when we think about thread, we don't, you know, so often, in not so much now, but I would say when I first started spinning back in the dark ages, that people would wonder why I wanted to make thread. You know, what possible use could thread be? And I think, well, you only think of it as clothing. And, you know, when I would say that I made textiles, they'd say, oh, well, you must make sweaters for women, meaning that not even men wore sweaters. And what was curious to me is that we don't connect it to things like the fact that we got to this world from the old world with sails. With thread, with the ability, the technical ability to spin a thread out of a plant that would harness the power of the wind across the Atlantic and move us here. I mean, that's no small thing. And we still use those things. We may have changed the fiber, but we still use them.
Well, and this is what makes me think. So, and this goes back to that earlier question about cultural differences and stuff, right? To an extent. So, so living here in the Andes in the former Inca Empire, in a world where there was not a lot of tool metal, you know, you didn't have iron and bronze and all that kind of stuff. The metal that everybody had was gold and silver, which is beautiful, but it doesn't hold an edge very well, or you're not going to make gears out of it or that kind of thing. So the technical problems that were solved in the New World prior to contact with Europe, and these are advanced and serious and heavy duty technical problems, were solved with textiles and stone and ceramic. And there is a very ethnocentric way of looking at these things, which says, oh, well, New World people were Stone Age people. They didn't work with iron and bronze and steel. Well, they didn't have those materials, but they solved, you know, they did brain surgery, they did electroplating, they did massive plumbing infrastructure, massive highways, complex engineering, and they did it with yarn and stone and ceramic. And so for me, living here and growing up here, there was never this thing where people would say, well, why would you even make yarn? So when I first moved back to the US to go to college and people started saying that, I was floored, right? And I started thinking about, how do you get to that point? Because my grandmother wasn't even on that page, right? Like my great-grandmother wasn't. And so how do you get to that point? And I believe that was socially engineered by people with industrial concerns in terms of wanting to sell their products, right? that the ignorance of textiles, the ignorance of things that are made by hand, and the value judgment that things that are made by hand are not good was socially engineered in order to sell mass market stuff. So people had to be intentionally trained away from knowing that that stuff was good. And that hasn't happened yet in the Andes. And I think it's a harder sell in the Andes because there is this this whole swath of amazing cultures like the Incas who were so remarkable in terms of the things that they accomplished without European, without steel, without that kind of thing. So so here, textiles has never sounded like just a bridge. It also sounds like your potato sacks. It sounds like ropes. It sounds like weapons. It sounds like bridges. It sounds like all of these things that people do with textiles. Like, well, you need rope to tie your roof on. You need, you know, all of these kinds of things to engage in your engineering. And I believe that the same thing must have once been true in what is now the heavily industrialized world, and that we got trained away from thinking of things in that way. But yeah, it's amazing the institutional disrespect of anything that is textile related, and along with that, the genderedness of it, where it's supposed to be a thing for chicks, right? So
Domestics.
It can't be good.
Yeah.
It can't be
Yeah.
serious.
Well, it can't be serious. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you are. The distaff side, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, the distaff side. Unless all you're hauling is yarn.
Yeah. Yeah. That was when people would say the distaff side, you know, I'd always think, and just where would you be without us, you know? When I looked at things like the yurts, they're all held together with little bits of, they don't have, same thing, no metal. So they tie a knot on one side, tie a knot on the other side, and put the panels together with a hard cord that they've made. And I come from an old Hebridean family, and I know that they had sod roofs. Well, you don't have a sod roof without having a lot of trash in your breakfast cereal. Let me tell you. So I lived with a sod roof in Canada for a while, a couple of years, and it was really interesting. So you have to have something underneath it. Well, so we find the coarse outer hair on the Hebridean sheep is like wire. It's indestructible. It doesn't dissolve in water. It's not like what we think wool is. It's really, really, really strong. Well, they made cloth that they put down and then put the peat on top of that. And then they had a roof that didn't drop insects, bugs, and dirt into the cereal in the morning. So we look at that and we think, well, you know, that's engineering. That's what it is.
It is engineering.
Is engineering. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then this is one of the things that gets me too, when you see, like, you know, this Twitter thread, a thread. But when you see, so even our language, right? But when you see like a Twitter thread where someone says, and knitting, it turns out, is like engineering. It is engineering. It's not like engineering. It's some of the oldest engineering that humanity has, right? There's so much there. You have to understand the material science of what makes yarn possible. You have to understand how to make it twist and hold together. You have to understand structures of plied yarns. And that's before you can even start knitting the sweater and thinking about making a three-dimensional object from a one-dimensional thing, right? That is engineering. That is some no shit heavy duty engineering, pardon my French and all, but it really is. And so even where we see threads where people are trying to talk about how it's cool that now here's someone at MIT who's a physicist but also does knitting, which is like engineering. I'm like, no, here's a knitter who has also bothered to go do something like physics, right? Which is much like making yarn, right? It's much like trying to understand how you make stuff. You know, why don't we center that, right?
Well, how did this happen to us? How did we get discounted?
Well, I truly believe that it happened as a socially engineered thing on the part of people who were building early manufactories and then taking the or hand out of it, right? So I mean, we know from even relatively recent history that, like, Henry Ford, for instance, gave us the the United States concept of the nuclear family living in a single family house in the suburbs and so forth, and that he engineered this for workers in his factories who would then, you know, be leading this lifestyle that would require them to buy a car, which conveniently they could do from the place that they were working at due to having wages and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, industrialists had to get people to accept wages and jobs and not doing things in their homes and in their communities of people who were artisans and masters at doing all this kind of stuff. And I think it is, you know, filthy lucre that, or money that was the driving factor and the motivator for making a lot of that kind of stuff happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We should
Kira,
be-
what do you think about asking that question?
I think it's great. We have some other questions in the Q&A, but I am happy just to let the three of you roll because it feels like we are having that, you know, whiskey at the bar at the end of a fiber festival kind of thing. And I know for all of you, that's part of the joy of going to a fiber festival. Teaching, yes, is amazing, but also the chance to meet with like-minded people who've really like thought about this stuff intensely over many, many years and have opinions, and kind of sharing that is wonderful. Yeah. And I do have a couple people saying that they'd love to watch this over. We are recording. It's probably going to take a little while to get it up, but we are going to put it on the Lambtown Festival YouTube channel so that you can watch this again, recommend it to your friends. If they want to make a little donation to Lambtown Festival, that's nice, but it won't be required. We have a bit of time left. I do want to make sure to ask all three of you to talk a bit about what's coming up next for you and the best way for folks to reach you.
We're all being polite.
You go first, Maggie. We haven't heard from you for a while. What are you working on and how can people get in touch with you?
I am working on an intermediate spinning book. I've got, hopefully maybe some classes will go next year. You know, that's one of the joys of being a teacher, is being able to go, say, to the folk school and Maryland and places like that. They're just in Harrisville. There's just, it's nice to see different parts of the country and what people are doing. But, and then there's an article in Ply, this Ply, and I've got one coming up in the winter issue where Judy, who is my business partner, and I spin and she weaves a scarf, which was also an interesting concept because actually the scarf you see in the article is the second scarf. And you can reach me just, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I don't have an official website. It was the shop website for so many years. That's all I needed, but it's a new world. So that's me.
Great. And Instagram, you are Woolen Spinner, right?
Woolen Spinner, yeah.
Yep. And we might be seeing some Instagram lives coming up.
Indeed. Yes, thanks to Abby.
You can find me at abbiesyarns.com and also patreon.com/abbiesyarns. I am Abby's Yarns, ABBYSYARNS, on pretty much all the social media. I'm also on Twitter and on Facebook. I'm kind of trying to move away from Facebook for a variety of reasons. So, but there's no way that you really can. So Instagram also, and YouTube, Abby's Yarns, and all of those places. What I've got coming up right now, in September, I launched my spinning 1, 2, 3, and 4 basic spinning curriculum that leads you up to being an intermediate spinner. So those are classes that go on, that meet weekly in Zoom, and there is a Discord live chat component and multiple meeting sessions and so forth. So those are live online and available recorded, so you can work at your pace and work through those classes. And I'm also getting ready to do some more virtual tourism stuff that is going to show you around my town bit by bit as our quarantine starts to end. I can't travel a lot of places around Peru still, but I can show you around my town, which is a pretty interesting town. And I'm working on trying to use all of this downtime without a lot of tourism to build on the facilities that I had just started getting up and running, hoping to make it possible for people to come do fiber retreats based out of my place here, and then also go see a lot of the exciting stuff going on. So I'm totally working on making Maggie and Judith want to come bring groups of people to hang out with me here in Peru and go do cool yarn stuff. So that's what's coming up for me.
All right.
I like the idea of cool yarn stuff. That sounds
Me
really
as
good.
well.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Well, I am in a black hole of communication, so I'm a bit hard to get hold of. I'm going to have a website in the next couple of months, and I suppose, I don't know what we'll call it, but it'll be Judith McKenzie, and I'm sure you'll be able to track it now. And
You'd make
I'd
it
like
Judith says.
yeah, Judith says. Yeah. And I've been thinking about doing one-on-one tutorials as well, putting together a series of small tutorials so that I could do on person-to-person spinning techniques, which I think would be fun too. So we'll see what happens next. It's been an interesting year. I live in an area where sometimes I live here because the Coast Guard's here, and therefore I get wireless. Other than that, I'd be dead in the water. Yeah. So it's quite isolated, but it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. Quiet and peaceful. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I write for Ply, and I've got a couple of articles coming up in the next couple of magazines, and I will do a book for them in the next year or so. Yeah. Have a happy life. Lucky me. Me and my cat.
I actually love that with the workshop videos, everybody's pets made a cameo.
Oh, that's true. Didn't they ever? Yeah.
It's one of the lovely things. I know from the very beginning in this process, people were a little nervous about recording at home, but it's so nice to see where you live. And one of your videos, Judith, we got to hear like the light rain falling, which I'm sure is pretty constant there.
Yeah,
But it made it feel like we were with you, which was just really wonderful.
Yeah. 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 I'd love to have you come and have a look at, you know, I live in this area because there's a old textile dig. There's a dig that not an old textile dig, but there were textiles in it, and it goes back a long time, pre-contact here, pre us being here at all. So it's the Makah tribe, and to see the objects that they made with, again, back to that simple life. The beautiful objects that they made, they're just incredible. They're just incredible. So I've taken people on tours through them. Right now, everything is closed. The tribes very wisely said, sorry. I live above the Quileute tribe, and the Makah are just farther up the coast. So what they said was, we've seen pandemics, thank you very much. And we know what has happened to us before in the smallpox epidemic when Europeans came to the New World, and we are just closing our doors. So that also has been interesting and a bit lonely to not have those communities. They have, yeah, it's been interesting. But I think a very wise move on their part. Yeah. But there's some beautiful things to see. You know, things that go way back in time out here.
Yeah. I think that you could maybe take a page from Abby's playbook and do some virtual fiber tourism in that area too.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. Yeah.
We should get together. I would love to get together with you on Zoom sometime, Judith, and show you how I'm doing some of the things I'm doing. And same with you, Maggie. I'd love to. I'd love to, share whatever I can to, keep us all doing what we're doing.
Good.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to have to wrap this up. I just posted in the chat 2 links. One is to the next thing coming up, which is vendor interviews starting at noon, and then also the entire festival schedule. We have coming up. We have some community meetups. We have a sheep producers panel. We have a sheep events panel. We've got lots of vendor interviews. And tomorrow morning is the sheep to shawl competition judging, which I think will be fascinating and educational to watch, whether you're spinners and weavers or not. I do want to mention again that this panel that we've just had will be on the Lambtown Festival YouTube channel once we all have a chance to breathe and recover from working up to the festival. And then all of the workshops are going to be re-released. So if you really connected with somebody today and didn't take any of their workshops, you will get another chance. So that'll be happening again as soon as we are able to. So thank you everybody for watching. We had over 125 people watching this today, which was lovely. And thank you so much, Abby and Judith and Maggie, for coming and having this amazing conversation with each other. It was really wonderful to be able to listen in.
Thank you, Kira, for everything you've done, and the festival for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, I really want to say that that what Lambtown has done, and especially, you know, thanks to all of the efforts that you've put forth here, Kira, is really exceptional, really groundbreaking, and I think it sets the stage for, you know, the modern festival and its online offerings. I just think you've done a terrific job, and I really hope to see a lot of this kind of stuff continue, and I hope that it has been fun and productive for you personally as well.